all been there, right? That moment when you're stepping outside, taking in the quiet of the neighborhood, and you catch a glimpse of your neighbor. You wave, exchange pleasantries, and head on with your day. Neighbors, they're supposed to be the people you trust, the ones who watch your house when you're away, the ones who bring over a cup of sugar when you run out. But what happens when the person living right next to you isn't just quirky or odd, but someone you should be terrified of? What do you do when your neighbor doesn't just keep to themselves, but has a darkness lurking behind closed doors? Tonight, we dive into 3 true stories of creepy neighbors whose seemingly innocent facades hid something far more chilling. These aren't your average strange neighbor tales, they're stories that will make you question everyone who lives next to you. So settle in, because by the end of tonight, you might just look at your neighbor in a whole new light, or maybe you'll never look at them the same way again. When my husband and I moved into our new home, it felt like we had found the perfect place. Quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and the kind of neighborhood where everyone waved hello. It seemed like the ideal spot to settle down and start a family. But then, there was the man next door. He wasn't like the others. At first, it was subtle, almost easy to ignore. But looking back, I wish I had paid more attention. He never really fit in, and now, I wonder if we were just too naive to see the warning signs. At first, it was the little things that started to bother me. He'd stand at the fence, just staring at us while we worked in the garden. His eyes never blinked, just fixated on us like he was studying us. I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe he was just lonely. But then, things started getting stranger. The notes appeared in our mailbox. They weren't threatening at first, just short, cryptic messages that made no sense. Like, the garden grows best with the right hands. I didn't think much of it, just assumed he was a little odd. But then, I began hearing things. Strange sounds from his shed, late at night. At first, it was the clinking of metal, followed by what sounded like a muffled thud. I couldn't make out what it was, but it didn't sound normal. I told my husband, but he brushed it off. "He's just working late," he said. Doc stopped. One evening, while taking out the trash, I heard it again, the muffled sound, like someone was crying. It stopped me in my tracks. I stood there, frozen, staring at that shed. I called out, but no one answered. When I told my husband about it, he laughed it off again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. Then, one night, I saw him digging. The moonlight cast an eerie glow over his backyard, and there he was, furiously digging a hole, as if he was in a hurry. He didn't see me watching, but I couldn't look away. The next morning, the hole was gone, the ground perfectly level, like nothing had ever happened. But I knew something wasn't right. I started feeling like I was being watched, like he was always there, lurking in the shadows. One night, I saw him again, dragging something large into the shed, something wrapped in a tarp. It was heavy, like he was struggling to carry it. I didn't know what to do. Something inside me snapped. I called the police, hoping they could make sense of this. The police said they couldn't do anything without evidence, and I was left standing there, my heart racing, as I realized that I might be the only one who had seen the truth. The next day, I found a note pinned to our door. It simply read, "Mind your own business." I couldn't shake the chill that ran down my spine as I stared at those words. We left the house a week later. We had Tommy husband couldn't understand why I was so terrified, but I couldn't stay there, knowing what I knew. What if he had seen me watching him? What if he was getting ready to do something worse? A few months after we moved, I saw it in the news. Woman's remains had been found buried in his backyard. The police had searched his property, and that's when they discovered it. I'll never forget the feeling that washed over me when I read those words. I had been so close to something truly horrific. And every night, I wonder what was in that shed. What had he been hiding all those nights? I still don't have the answers, but I'll never forget those nights. I used to live in a small town where everyone knew everyone. It was the kind of place where you could leave your door unlocked and not think twice about it. Except for one person, the woman who lived across the street. She didn't fit in with the rest of us. We never saw her during the day, not even once. People would say she was a bit of a recluse, but that didn't sit right with me. At night, well, that's when things got weird. Her curtains were always drawn, even in the middle of the day. It felt like she was hiding from the world. But sometimes, when the sun was low, I'd catch a glimpse of her pale face, just staring out the window, staring at me. She never waved, never smiled, just that cold, emotionless stare. It didn't make any sense to me. Everyone else in the neighborhood was friendly, and yet she never acknowledged anyone. But it was when I started seeing her out at night that I really got uneasy. One night, I saw her outside, digging in her yard. It was past midnight. She was digging furiously, like she had a purpose, but I couldn't figure out why she was out there so late, or what she was burying. The next day, the spot she'd been digging was covered with a strange gardenia thing like the rest of the lawn. It looked off. There was something unnatural about the way it was arranged, like she was trying to hide something, but I couldn't put my finger on it. After that, my dog started acting strange. Every night, without fail, he would bark at her house. Not just a random bark, either like he was sensing something wrong, something dangerous. He'd stand at the window, growling low, his hackles raised. I tried to ignore it, but it got harder and harder to brush it off. I even started keeping the blinds shut when the sun went down, just to avoid seeing her stare from that window. One night, I heard a loud crash coming from her house of something heavy, like furniture being thrown around. I rushed to the window, hoping it wasn't anything serious, and that's when I saw her. She was standing in the middle of the street, staring at me. No movement, no expression, just a cold, lifeless gaze. I swear, it felt like she was waiting for me to do something, like she wanted me to react, but I didn't. I couldn't. I just watched her for what felt like forever. The next morning, I found something waiting for me on my doorstep. A small wrapped package with a note. "We need to talk." My heart sank. I didn't want to know what she wanted. I hadn't done anything to her, at least. I didn't think so. But curiosity got the best of me. I opened the package, and inside was a photograph of me. A picture of me standing in my own living room, taken from her house. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. I immediately called the police. When they arrived, the house was completely empty. Not a single light on. No sign of her anywhere. It was like she had vanished overnight. I couldn't believe it. They searched the house, knocked on the door, but no one answered. It was like she had never been there. The police thought I was imagining things. Maybe it was some prank, they said. But I knew what I'd seen. I knew she had been watching me, and now she was gone. Just gone. A few months later, a new family moved into the house. They were nice Inotwo kids. A dog. The typical suburban life. But one day, they came over, looking shaken. They said they'd been going through the attic when they found something strange, old photos of people they didn't recognize. journals full of odd scribbles, and hair. It didn't make sense. They asked me if I knew anything about the woman who had lived there before, but I didn't. I told them everything I knew, but I still have no idea who she was or where she went. I just know one thing. I'm glad she's gone, and I'll never forget that cold, hollow stare from across the street. I live in an apartment complex, and for the most part, it's been great. My neighbors are friendly, the rent's affordable, and I've always felt safe. But then there's him, the man who lives next door. At first, I thought he was just a little eccentric, but over time, let's just say he made me rethink everything I thought about safety. It started small, almost unnoticeable. I'd leave my apartment, and I'd feel Ethy's gaze. He was watching me, and I knew it. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but it was always the same. Whenever I stepped out, I could feel his eyes on me through the peephole. It was like he was waiting for me to do something, to make a move. And the worst part? He never said a word. He just stood there, watching. At first, I thought maybe it was just some weird misunderstanding, but then things escalated. Every time I returned to my apartment, I'd find something strange waiting for me at the door: flowers, little trinkets, even notes. The messages were always unsettling. You're so beautiful when you sleep. It was like he knew things about me, personal things. I felt sick to my stomach. I installed a security camera, hoping it would give me some peace of mind. But when I checked the footage, my stomach dropped. There he was, standing in front of my door, staring through the peephole. His face was inches from the lens. The most disturbing part? He smiled. I couldn't even move. I was so horrified. That was when I realized he wasn't just watching me. He was obsessed. One night, I heard noises outside my door. At first, I thought it was just the building settling, but then I saw it on the camera feed. He was trying to pick my lock. It was so quiet, so methodical. I froze, not knowing what to do. My heart was pounding in my chest. I called the building manager immediately, but when I told them what was happening, they just brushed it off. He's harmless, they said. Just a little odd. But they had no idea what it felt like to live in fear every time I closed my eyes. One night, I came home late, hoping to finally get some rest. But when I opened my door, it wasn't right. The door was slightly ajar. My heart dropped into my stomach. I stepped inside, and the lights were flickering on and off, as if someone had been there. The air felt thick, heavy. I could feel someone's presence, as if they were watching me, waiting. I didn't know what to do. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a kitchen knife, and called the police. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the phone. I told them I thought someone had broken in, but by the time they arrived, I was paralyzed with fear. And then they found him. He was hiding in my closet, crouched in the dark, holding one of my dresses. He looked up at them, completely calm. No emotion, no remorse. Just a cold stare. The police arrested him without much trouble. But the worst part? He didn't even seem scared. He was calm, almost too calm, like he knew everything was going to be fine. He had a stack of photos of me taken from inside my apartment. It made my skin crawl just thinking about it. After that, I moved out as quickly as I could. I couldn't stay there another night, but even now, I double-check every lock, every window, every night. I still feel like someone's watching me. Maybe it's paranoia, or maybe it's because I know that, for him, I was never just a neighbor. I was something more, and I don't think I'll ever escape that feeling. Sometimes, the real monsters aren't hiding in the dark corners of the woods. They're living right next door. We trust those around user neighbors, the people we pass every day believing we're safe. But as these stories show, sometimes the threat is far closer than we ever imagined. Which of these creepy neighbor stories disturbed you the most? Was it the man in the shed? The woman who vanished without a trace? Or the watcher lurking in the shadow? Whatever the story, one thing's clear: there's more to some neighbors than meets the eye. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced something strange with a neighbor? Or maybe you've noticed something that just didn't sit right? We'd love to hear your story. And before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more terrifying true stories. You never know what's lurking next, so stay safe and maybe keep an eye on your neighbor.